Hello everyone. So today we're going to talk about growing up as a dude and how hard it is, because it's hard. Specifically, we talk a lot on this channel about mental health issues and how they're discussed on TikTok and social media in general. And a lot of this stuff is kind of seen in a weird way to me. Like, I think we have a way of compartmentalizing the different problems in our society as if they're these unique problems that just accumulate together to make this horrible thing. Whereas I think it can be seen another way. I think all of these different problems when it comes to mental health and economic inequality and things like masculinity crises and body image crises, these things are correlated. These things come from the same tree, and maybe they have different appearances at first and they're their own fields to study, but ultimately these things are interconnected. And so if we don't have a humanistic approach to everything, where we try to look at, for instance, men's issues as if it's a human issue that has to do with mental health and economic inequality and violence and things like that, we're not going to be able to address men's issues in a robust way. We're going to be putting band-aids over huge issues. Today, we're going to talk about something called body dysmorphia or body dysmorphic disorder. And specifically, we're going to talk about how this affects men and the recent uptick of content that's addressing these body image issues and potential disorders like BDD, with the aim to bring light to how men are being affected by the presentation of masculinity in social media and media in general, the expectations of masculinity, and how that affects men's body image, how that affects men to the point where they're seeing themselves in the mirror, and not only do they dislike what they see, but they potentially have a huge disconnect from the actuality of their appearance.
Along the way, like honestly, every single morning I woke up and I was so discouraged with how I looked. Like literally like losing weight. When you're flat.
In this video, I'm going to dive a bit into scientific literature and discussions, and then sort of address a lot of the combined issues that I think have to be addressed if we're going to help people of different gender identities and different situations out with body dysmorphic disorder and all the other problems that not only cause body dysmorphic disorder, but all these other mental health issues. So it's going to be kind of a mess, and I'm kind of kicking it off the heezy. That's not what the term is. I'm gonna kind of shoot from the hip and talk about how I feel here, and I hope to hear from you in the comment section what your personal experiences are and how we can potentially address mental health issues in society with an eye on these particular trends to guide us. So let's begin after this ad break.
Oh, mama. There's got to be a faster way to get huge.
So first, we should start with a robust definition of body dysmorphia. Again, that's a term that refers to body dysmorphic disorder, which is defined by the DSM-IV, which is the big psychological manual that defines all the things psychologically, as preoccupation with an imagined defect in appearance. If a slight physical anomaly is present, the person's concern is markedly excessive. The preoccupation must cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning, and it cannot be better accounted for by another mental disorder such as anorexia nervosa. Now here's the thing. We have typically seen body image issues and body image mental conditions discussed from the lens of women. That's just kind of the sort of narrative we've agreed on, right? Is that women are typically the ones that are discussed when it comes to something like anorexia, bulimia, eating disorders, and body dysmorphia. It's something that we talk about when it comes to people with non-masculine gender identities, right? It's not usually, at least historically, discussed as something that men go through. And more creators and other people are bringing to light that this is in fact a particular male issue, that there is a particular thing that is ongoing, especially in online male communities that are centered on fitness oftentimes, wherein men are experiencing body dysmorphia and having severe issues. A particular term that's been coined recently is the term muscle dysphoria, which focuses on excessive concern that one's body build is too small or is insufficiently muscular. This is something that you're seeing getting talked about a lot.
Millions of guys suffer from body dysmorphia, and we don't even acknowledge it. I get a lot of messages every day from guys that are depressed because they are not tall enough, have bad skin, are going bald, are skinny, overweight, or even have a small PP. They perceive these as flaws, causing them depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. Whilst most of the time, the flaw doesn't exist or is grossly exaggerated. We act like tough guys with muscles, testosterone, but this sort of stuff does affect us. And we need to acknowledge it instead of suppressing it. There is a fine line between wanting self-improvement and body dysmorphia. But if you're not sure, do some research or see a medical professional.
The thing is, the first thing that I want to address is that we have this tendency when it comes to these names of diagnoses, these diagnostic concepts like a disorder, like body dysmorphia disorder, or in previous videos, we talked about ADHD and autism as diagnoses that people online, on social media, on TikTok, a lot of the time are bringing to themselves without seeing a professional. And a lot of the concepts, a lot of the discourse and critique that gets levied is people are exaggerating. People are saying that they have disorders when they don't have sufficient reason to believe that. That means that they're subsequently downplaying the reality of those diagnoses, of those conditions, which makes it harder for everyone. And I'm sympathetic to that. And we've talked about the nuance there. But there's also an aspect of this that we have to acknowledge, that I've tried to acknowledge, which is that it's not as if diagnoses are a silver bullet and that science, especially when it comes to mental health, is a silver bullet. It's not like you have an injury, you have a broken ankle and you go into a doctor and they look at your ankle and they go, yep, it's broken. And you have a perfect objective assessment that says this is a broken ankle. Diagnoses are very much about well-informed, essentially opinions that are formed by doctors after they receive a lot of information. They are very valuable, they are very valid, but they are not this on and off switch, okay? There's not this thing that happens where you either have ADHD or you either have insert condition here or you completely don't and you know for sure that you don't, and there's no way that you can find out later in life that you may possibly have it. And here's the thing, even if it is to some degree like that, it's not helpful to shame people for aligning their own experiences with potentially having a disorder and being curious about potentially having that disorder to the point where they're talking about it publicly. Yes, self-diagnosis can be a messy and problematic thing, but it's better than nothing a lot of the time. It's certainly something that a lot of people naturally will tend to, especially when you live in the United States, which has a for-profit healthcare system, and you realize that being able to go through that process of getting a diagnosis for something is extremely costly, not only in terms of money, but in terms of time. So when it comes to body dysmorphia, if a lot of dudes online are saying that they're experiencing body dysmorphia, even if it's not like straightforward, they have the severity, they have the detachment from reality, wherein they're seeing something in their appearance that's not there or that's basically not noticeable and it's completely altering their life in a bad way. Even if we're not sure it's that, or we're almost positive that it's not that, there's something alarming about men sitting here and saying, I have body dysmorphia. That should be alarming. It should be alarming that within fitness circles, more and more dudes, whether they're famous content creators or they're people in the audience, are sitting here saying, hey, you know that body dysmorphia thing that we go through? You know that experience that we have with this potentially debilitating condition? The fact that they're using that condition as a shorthand may have some effects in downplaying the reality of people who have that condition full on, but ultimately, it should also be something that we're taking notice to. It's not some horrible thing that's being done. It's a messy process that people are engaging in because they're trying to get help. They recognize that they have issues and that this is a condition that is potentially something that they're experiencing, but that also has a social reality to it, that also could be a condition that is shared among people in society. And they're talking about it. And that's good. You know, I hope that you weren't going all the way into this video and expecting me to say it wasn't good. It's good that people are talking about body dysmorphia. I think so, at least. And yes, it's important that we bring attention to the informed people, the educated people who can tell us with their expertise what is what and what is not. But again, it's not as if mental health science is this perfectly aligned, straightforward, objective silver bullet thing. There's a video by Healthy Gamer GG, Dr. K, where he talks about male body dysmorphia. It's pretty recent and it's thorough. It's a thorough overview for like 40 minutes wherein he talks about this condition. And what you find from what he's saying is that within the scientific community, it's also something that is the subject of inquiry, debate, confusion.
A lot of the research on eating disorders and diagnostic criteria essentially came out of studying women and Caucasians. And so we're starting to discover that our initial assumptions about how we diagnose an eating disorder was very, very culturally and gender bound. And so what we tend to see is our screening questions are really focused on weight loss. But really the core issue here is a body image issue. And as we've done more and more research on different cultures and different genders, what we're actually starting to discover is that core issue of body image manifests in different groups of people in different ways. And women have unhealthy ideals that are portrayed to them by the media and things like that. But those ideals tend to be like gender specific, right? So for women, it tends to be focused on thinness. For men, it tends to be focused on muscularity. I'm starting to wonder whether a lot of the people that I've worked with who are very, very like into this alpha beta mindset, or who describe themselves as being like emotionally numb and socially anxious, I think that we may be like over-diagnosing people with social anxiety who actually have body image issues. That's actually like kind of the wrong move, because what that person may need is something different.
And so with that, we have to acknowledge that even if we're not able to make these clear delineations, there's certainly a social condition. There's a social reality that is affecting people's mental health in a severe way, to the point where if they don't have these conditions straightforward, they feel like they may be having them. And so we got to talk about those social conditions. After the break, I'll talk to you about my experience with body image and my purview, let's say, on what people are experiencing when it comes to their body image, what men are experiencing, what men are going through, and why the ways in which we are dealing with these issues are inadequate and need to be critiqued and changed. And I'm not going to have the perfect answers for you, but I will have some words, because I use words. All right, here's a break. All right, thanks for watching the ad. It helps the channel a lot. So let's talk about a few things. For one, social conditions refers to the things that are going on in society, right? The social conditions. What are people's moods? What are people's beliefs? What are the economic realities that underscore all of these things? Clearly, we're living in a world right now where things are pretty messed up. A lot of that is what we do on this channel, right? We talk about how things are messed up in the world and it's affecting society a certain way. And it comes down to economic inequality, economic realities that are being transformed into these very painstaking debates and these painstaking confusions and conflicts. Is painstaking the right word? One thing is clear, for instance. Boys grow up with very unhealthy ideas of masculinity. We see this in the case of Andrew Tate, in the case of all these other sort of influencers that talk about masculinity. I recently was in a video by FD Signifier, and I talked about my own experience with masculinity and things like that. And it was really great, and I was really excited to be a part of it. So that's part of what has inspired this video. If you haven't seen it, check it out. We know that from a young age, men are drilled to, for instance, be not in touch with their emotions, to avoid crying, to avoid being behind in competition, etc., etc. And a lot of this has to do with body image too. I'd be lying if I said that I didn't grow up and internalize a lot of negative things about how I looked. I'm a person who's always been very skinny. Somebody said I had a pencil neck recently in the comment section. I was like, I think he's talking about me, but I'm pretty sure he was talking about how skinny my neck is, and I'm aware of that. I'm a little insecure about that. And as life goes on, a lot of men do not get the tools and the resources to understand that these ideas that they've been taught from a young age are not only wrong, but that they are rooted within them to such a degree that they cause a lot of trauma, that they have been behind a lot of trauma, and that they have to be excavated out of you. Because your life just gets a lot easier and a lot happier when you get to release a lot of these things that you've been holding on to since you were young. So what's going on now? Why is it that for some reason it seems like this body dysmorphia has been more and more prevalent? Dr. K actually talks about that in the video a bit, about whether or not it's the society that's changing, that's causing more people to have body dysmorphia, or that's changing the way the diagnosis works in general.
Probably for the past 2 generations, we've had men who have probably had something similar to an eating disorder or a body dysmorphic disorder, but our diagnostic criteria have not really been able to pick that up. But that may not necessarily be the case. What we could actually be seeing is that actually it wasn't that bad, let's say 1 generation ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. But now what we're seeing is an acceleration of body image related mental health issues in men because of things like social media. As awareness of this has grown, researchers and clinicians have started to dive more into men who struggle with body image issues. What we're sort of noticing, though, is that the manifestations of these body image issues may be masquerading as other things. It seems like one of the most common manifestations of body image issues is what men will describe as socially anxious. Men with body image issues are high on the alexithymia scale. So alexithymia is the inability to recognize or name your emotions. So those emotions, we don't recognize them as emotions. They almost transform into something like logic in our minds. If you really look at what's the foundational belief for this alpha-beta conversation, at the bottom of the whole belief system is an image issue that shares a lot of features of that logical, irrational belief system. What I mean is that it's internally consistent in terms of logic, but it's not actually like based in science. Or more importantly, people who make progress in terms of their appearance don't actually feel better about themselves, right? Once a beta, always a beta. And especially because of things like social media, we're seeing people check a lot of these boxes. And so this is what's really tricky, is that even as psychiatrists, we're recognizing that the world is changing, people are changing, technology is changing the way that we perceive ourselves. And so we really aren't entirely caught up with it. So even things like muscle dysmorphia, which is the most common kind of male-related diagnosis that's studied, is not an official diagnosis. So it's like a proposed new diagnosis. So if this stuff kind of resonates with you, I'd strongly encourage you to get evaluated. But even if you get evaluated, consider that the default language that your therapist has may not really perfectly apply to this situation. And you may need to be a little bit more vocal about sort of sharing your thoughts and feelings. Not really convincing, but really giving your therapist a window into what your mindset truly is. If you're finding yourself having very, very rigid beliefs about what you should be eating, or rigid beliefs about how you feel about yourself or what you see when you look in the mirror, if you find yourself making upward comparisons and sort of assuming that there's an ideal body image that you will never meet, this could be one of those emerging body image kind of issues, and I'd encourage you to go seek help.
But I think part of it is that men really aren't, for whatever reason, getting the tools and the resources they need. And this is not to say that people don't have agency, that men can't figure things out on their own. I've been trying to figure things out, but nobody's perfect. People make mistakes. Some people make way more mistakes and do a lot more bad things than others. But ultimately, we are influenced by the way we grew up, by the things that we're taught, by the people around us. And if nobody's around us to show us the things that we need to do, then we keep going down a path. Why am I talking about this obvious thing? It's to say that, for one, society, as it changes, becomes more and more neurotic and anxious with the introduction of social media and the internet. And so you get all these new perspectives in your face, all this content, all these different people lobbying, paying money for your attention because your attention is currency. And a lot of what they're going to do, as politicians do and as companies do, is prey on your insecurities. They will prey on your insecurities to sell products, to get your vote, to get you to click like. Oftentimes, our insecurities are our greatest drivers. Okay, we celebrate that when it comes to sports and people like Michael Jordan. It's a truth that we all know about, right? Sometimes the anger that we feel towards somebody motivates us way more than the happiness that we feel when we achieve something. So we end up doing all this effort, putting all this energy into actions that we can take out on somebody when we don't like them, when we feel this anger, but spend way less energy doing things that we know will help us and make us feel good in the long run, like eating healthier. So when you make videos on a YouTube channel like mine, it is much, much more successful of a strategy to name your YouTube video something a little incendiary. Give your video a title that's going to annoy somebody, or that's going to get somebody who's annoyed about something to click on it so that they can feel seen or feel like they can engage with somebody else on that thing that they're annoyed about. A lot of the time, the comments that we get on our YouTube videos are not comments that indicate that people have watched the video throughout and have all these notes. They're comments with people that sometimes don't seem to have any interest in the video itself, don't have a lot of things to say about me, but they'll just pop in and write like a paragraph about, here's this thing I went through that has to do with this topic. And the point of that is that, unfortunately, that is an indicator of success. That indicates to me that I have successfully got people's attention. And the manner in which I did so was by titling my video a certain way, making my thumbnail a certain way, that essentially, for lack of a better word, triggers people into clicking it out of this emotional vindication. So if you have these deep-seated insecurities about the way you look, you don't feel like you're strong enough, you don't feel like you have enough weight on you, you don't feel like you are skinny enough, whatever the case might be, the thing that's going to attract you is oftentimes going to be the thing that relates to your insecurity, the thing that your insecurity is attracted to, is attentive to. Whether it's a video that says, people with your body type will never get any girls, or it's a video that says, why people with your body type deserve to get more girls. It's usually based on the same thing. You're clicking because you have that dormant insecurity, and if you haven't addressed it super well, you're not even going to be conscious of the process. You're just going to be on somebody else's YouTube video, somebody else's TikTok, didn't even know how you got there, hitting like and commenting your opinion because you just are operating out of that motivation. So if people are motivated to act in that way, and everybody right now is sort of making their business off of getting people's attention, and we have all these tools through which people's attention are being stolen, and so the race is more and more to be even more attention grabbing, then the thing is you're going to see things that are more incendiary, things that prey on your insecurities more, or that work towards your insecurities more, and you're going to see less success for things that have any level of mildness or randomness or neutralness to them. And this is where a lot of our memes come from, okay? What's great about jokes, whether for better or for worse, is that they are in some way reactionary. Memes are in some way reactionary. They recognize our insecurities. They are based off of our dormant feelings. Instead of trying to sort through those feelings and develop some sort of approach to them or some advice for them, what the memes do is the memes comment on them in some way that is in some way cathartic. Okay, and I always think of this particular meme, actually. It's a meme of Rick Ross and a meme of Lizzo side by side. Both of them are fatter people. A lot of people who are fat like to use the word fat. They don't like it when you say overweight. And one of them says, put on a shirt over Rick Ross, and the other one says empowering over Lizzo. It's this very interesting reactionary meme because it recognizes something. It recognizes a social condition, an insecurity, a frustration that a lot of men have, which is that idea that I referenced earlier that, for instance, something like body dysmorphia is something that is being experienced by all people, but only really gets talked about publicly through the lens of women. This is a thing that people have been feeling. This is a narrative that we can all generally kind of agree to, aside from the past couple of years, wherein people have made the effort to point out that men have body dysmorphia. It speaks to something of that. It speaks to something of how the idea of, plus size and big bodies is something that we tend to gender a certain way. We tend to gender it as something feminine. We tend to say, oh, we're empowering somebody's body, we're empowering somebody who's plus sized, and we're talking usually about women, right? Now, of course, there's some level to which you can debate this, and so this is not me necessarily saying this is the absolute truth, but what I'm saying is that this is something that we can kind of connect to, and that we kind of know what it is. We know that this is something that people perceive. We know that this is something that makes up our sort of social reality. And so what happens is this is a point of frustration that people don't really get a lot of time to think on because your time is being divided into a million different things. Your job overworks you, school overworks you, you have all these stresses from your family, you have all these stresses in life. And additionally, you don't have people around you to provide you with the resources and tools. So you have all these frustrations, and the most you can do is just bury them within you and turn them into insecurities and angers and all these different things. And then when we live in this attention economy, wherein attention is everything, and wherein companies are flying all over the place trying to get your attention through social media, etc. And memes are one of the things that are disseminated the most through social media as something that people do, not companies, to gain attention, but also to disseminate an idea, to give a vibe, to give a thought, to make a joke about something. The memes that will succeed are the ones that are oftentimes going to prey right on your insecurities. They're the ones that are going to be about your insecurities. If they don't prey on them, then they address them in some way, but they're going to address the things that you kept right here. And so what's so interesting about this meme is that clearly the message of the meme is somewhat hostile towards Lizzo. Like, especially in the context wherein I see the meme posted, it's hostile towards the idea that plus size women should be praised in some way. It's saying like, oh, what a joke that is, when if it was a dude, then this person would be mocked. And for some reason, the lesson isn't instead that like, hey, why don't we also empower dudes who are bigger, who are fatter? Why do we only sort of have this discussion supposedly about women? Or at the very least, why don't we make an effort to stand up for dudes who have body types like Rick Ross? Instead of saying that, the point we take from it, because we haven't taken the resources and the tools to address this insecurity, this anger, the thing we take is, well, haha, they're fat, and women are coddled, and men have to deal with the harsh reality. Whatever. So there's so many layers of that, from the fact that men are so willing to accept negative treatment and insecurity because they think that they have to be super strong, and then they justify it by mocking people oftentimes who they don't see as standing up and being as strong. Well, there's that, right? But there's also this very sad reality that rather than being able to take the time to unpack the very simple idea of everybody should be treated fairly, and then figure out how to apply that to something like body image, we are so often more or less going to just do the other way. We're gonna be hateful. We're gonna be angry. We're gonna argue with people. If your perception of both of these people is that they're both repulsive and should lose weight, you've taken the wrong message. Okay? The message is that we shouldn't be shaming people for how they look. And I know that there's the whole fat phobia conversation too about, is it not healthier to lose weight and da-da-da. And the truth of that, you know what? It's a very messy thing. I'm not going to get into it. But what I'll say is it's really not that complicated. No matter whether or not losing weight is going to be healthy for a person, which it isn't always, but sometimes is, it's never okay to shame a person for how they look. It's just not okay. It doesn't matter if you think that they should be doing more work on their body. Just leave them alone. Don't shame them. That's mean. That's wrong. Like, that's it. They're human beings, and human beings deserve to be respected for their bodies. So what does this have to do with body dysmorphia? Aside from the obvious commentary on body image, the fact is that a lot of men are realizing that they have these issues within themselves about how they look. And memes like these reinforce a status quo, because they are not efforts to unpack those insecurities and unpack where they came from and try to find solutions, but instead they are trying to focus on just finding some sort of attention from that insecurity, find some sort of outlet, some sort of release, no matter how toxic it is, to sort of justify that insecurity and justify a person's path for how they deal with their insecurity, no matter how toxic it is. So there's something that's kind of ironic in that when it comes to body dysmorphia, which clinically is very much the inability to see reality and address it for what it is when it comes to how you look, a lot of the way in which we have to fix the society that builds this kind of mental illnesses, whether or not people have them or whether or not people have similar things, the way in which we make this society better is by being honest, by addressing reality for what it is. We have to be honest with ourselves and admit that body shaming is a huge part of this problem. If we shame people for how they look, we internalize that. We internalize the idea that some people deserve to be shamed for how they look. And so when we see any reflection, any proximity in ourselves towards those people who we think deserve to be shamed for how they look, how is that going to make us feel? And so, of course, people are going to develop these insecurities and these conditions wherein any little amount of proximity that they might be able to perceive puts them in a spiral, because we don't have the society that's able to say, there's nothing that you should be shamed for, right? You shouldn't be shamed for this. This is not a natural phenomenon, okay? Mental conditions are not just these natural phenomena that appear out of nowhere. Mental health issues are drawn in great part out of the society, the social circumstances that surround them. And oftentimes those social circumstances are even somewhat determinative of who's sick and who's not, who's mentally ill and who's not. And I talked about that with Noah Samson, etc. If I think that it's funny to make fun of skinny guys for how they look, or that it's skinny guys that deserve less attention from people they're attracted to, etc., then how am I going to deal with my pencil neck? Right? How am I going to be able to handle the pencil neck? How am I going to develop a healthy relationship with my pencil neck if I'm not able to see that? It's only in being able to not care if I have a pencil neck or not that I'm going to be able to rest that insecurity. And of course, there's just so many dimensions of this. It's a very complicated issue, okay? I think sometimes we wish that the solutions for these things are clear-cut and that I should just write a 10-point manual of like how to fix mental health issues. But like, it's obviously not like that. But if we are talking about what we can do, here's what we can do. Here's what you can do, viewer. You can stop shaming people for how they look. You can stop orienting so much of your view of who's attractive and who's healthy based off of specific body types. You can acknowledge more and more that a lot of these dudes who are chiseled are still unhealthy in some ways. A lot of the times, especially when we talk about these actors, they're taking stuff, right?
And it's about a 3-month run-up. So you got to be in pretty good shape, but the 3 months before is very specific. And it finishes with dehydration. Don't do this at home. It's really...
And we can allow more and more the process of health to be everybody's own process that they have a right to address in their own way, and that we don't have a right to lord over. It's not my job to tell people whether or not they look good. Who cares what I think? Who cares what I think? Whether somebody's jacked, whether somebody's skinny, it doesn't, like, what I think is just what I think. And there's a difference between stepping outside of that and saying, you know what, this is the way that it should be, and saying, this is what I think. So body dysmorphic disorder, it's a clinical issue. It is a social issue. It is a lot of things. If you're struggling with it, think about seeing a professional. There are resources out there for you if you're struggling with your body image, if you're struggling with something. If you're a dude, reach out and find those resources and make sure that your premise, your basis for helping yourself, for trying to grow yourself, is not out of the idea of an inferiority in somebody else, an inferiority that you're trying to reduce in yourself, a superiority that you're trying to gain. Nobody's superior to anybody else. That has to be the baseline. We are not better than other people. We make the choices we make. We have our ideas. We see what we can do about it. There are good things to do. There are bad things to do. But like, yeah, man, I don't know. If you like this video, hit like, hit comment. Leave a comment on your thoughts on body dysmorphia. If you have experiences with it, feel free to share those. And feel free to tell us how much you think that was influenced by social situations, social media, the media that you saw, the things that were said by people around you. And let's talk about what we can do in order to make some of those things stop being so toxic and pervasive. Send a Ko-Fi if you want to send me $1 to buy a slice of pizza somewhere, wherever you can get a slice of pizza for $1. And thank you very much, and watch that FD Signifier video. And I'm gone. I'm done. Thank you. I'm wearing a hat. I look like Gary Vee. It's because I don't really love my hair today. You see, insecurity. That's a thing. It's a thing. Okay, goodbye.